EOS, it stands for the Entrepreneur Operating System. It was developed by Gino Wickman, and the purpose is to get into smaller businesses and really manage out, get the entrepreneur out of the organization.
Episode 48 with Bill Reeder. He's the president of Campus Cooks. Have you ever anticipated a conversation and then it goes completely in a different direction, but in a good way? That's exactly what happens in this episode. In this episode, you're going to learn all about the entrepreneurial operating system, how to stretch your team from being tactical to strategic, how to turn small failures into big success, big progress, the story behind Campus Cooks, trends in food, and how to mentor. You don't want to miss it. This is a power-packed 30-minute episode. Stay tuned. How to take your staff from tacticals to strategic. Another way of looking at this might be, how far in the future can you work? And this is a topic that my guest today, Bill, is going to share with us in detail. Bill, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Tony. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, we had some conversations ahead of time, and this really seemed to be a passion of yours as you're leading your company into the future. You've realized this need on your executive staff that people do have to develop this long-range vision, and we kind of want to get your thoughts on how one goes about doing that with their staff.
Yes, I mean, it really starts from the organization and the mindset, and from us and from Campus Cooks, we're really a learning and growth mindset. So for our organization, we really put a lot of emphasis in the training and growing of the individuals.
I think you bring up a great point about the culture of the organization, and I do think it starts with the CEO. It does start with a leader. Do you think that this is a skill that you're born with, or do you feel like this is something that has to be taught and trained?
Sure. It's interesting. The same thing that people discuss. Are you born a leader, or is it something you develop? I think everything's a bit of nature and nurture. And that'd be the same way of developing strategic thinkers and helping your team members to become more strategic. And for us, that's involved in really three things. And we want to make sure as we look at it that when we interview, we want to make sure that team members or prospective candidates get it. And then we move through, do they have the capacity to do it? And then do they generally want it? So do they get it? Can they do it? And do they want it? And that starts, of course, with their abilities. And that'd be really in the interview process.
Is there something unique that you search for? Do you have a behavioral interview style that you try to uncover that skill set or that desire?
Within the interview, we do different, first, we do assessments, and that assessments really measures how well the individual fits a specific job. It also looks into their thinking style, their behavior, and their interests, and that gives us an idea how best to support them, as well as giving us a window into how they, what work they really like to do and how they handle, stressful situations. But the main thing as well, besides an assessment, we really interview around our culture. These questions and our values for us, it deals with our alpha. And one of them is always growing personally and professionally, living a healthy work-life balance, passionate about food and service, honesty and respect, and above all else, enhancing the Greek experience. But when you go to the A, always growing professionally and personally, we're really going to interview around those values. How do people grow? What training have they done? What projects have they taken on in their prior jobs, that have helped them get to where they are today? So for us, we want to make sure they understand the nuts and bolts of the job, but then we want, as they know their role, we want to give them every opportunity to grow within that. And that's really the first step of, interviewing, making sure that, they're a good fit for the culture, and then we can train them up. We're not necessarily worried about whether they have all the skills. We want them to come in to fit our values. And then when they get in, we can really see how, far and high they can go.
Interesting that's one of the first pillars of your culture is the A in alpha, always growing professionally.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's a big thing that I do. I mean, obviously, being part of podcasts, having coaches, being part of peer groups, if you take all these assessment behavioral, I'm a learner, it comes up. So for us, we want to, that's what we really stress. And then when they get in, within the organization, we start seeing, can they do it? And then that growth really appears itself, as you asked before, about the time span. Are they able to complete these projects without direct support? And that was through a speaker that I heard through my Vistage group, was really saying how the value of their job is really measured by the length of time they can work out. So they get an assignment. Is it a 1 day, 3 day, 5 day? Eventually, of course, your leadership members, you want to stretch them where they can start looking 1, 2, 3 years out. So that's when you ask about time span, is how far they can work without direct support. And the longer they can work, obviously they're going to be of more value.
That's a new concept for me, this idea of working 1, 2, 3 years out without direct support. So you're talking about self-governance.
Yeah. I mean, you're trying to build an organization. Everyone talks about accountability. And when you're accountable for your projects, you can delegate it, but you have to own them. And the longer term these projects are going to be more impactful to the organization. They become more strategic and less tactical. And thus, when we look at project based and holding people accountable with the organization, that is, we want to do something that's longer than 2 weeks. It doesn't necessarily have to be as long as a quarter, but it gets people thinking about how far they can work out. It could be simple as working on a back end feature, special events, and how we provide food service to fraternities and sororities. So how can we do special events, that can fit different students' budgets, different recruitment budgets? How can we do a better job of the staffing and the food and the ordering and give them more of a repertoire and selection to select from? That's something that can be handled within a quarter. When you look at overhauling, an app or a website, that's probably, 6 to 9 months, and those are the different things that we look at in those time spans.
You strategically are giving these projects to people to kind of give them the training to learn how to stretch themselves out. Like you say, some might be quarterly, some might be almost a year long. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. We also utilize, I don't know whether you're familiar with EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System, and that gives it a framework where, quote unquote, everyone within the organization needs to have as they term it, a rock, or a project. And thus, everyone in the organization, we're starting to develop, what they're working. And as they work through it, our department heads, our leadership team is developing them, not only coaching, but mentoring them, and seeing, really stretching them and see how much more, they can go. But first and foremost, as they do their job, they have to master it. And then as they master those skills, we need to help them continue to learn and add really to their abilities.
Well, tell me a little bit more about this EOS.
EOS was developed by Gino Wickman, and it is the Entrepreneur Operating System.
See, we go for live fire around here, Bill. You might have thought we had all these questions laid out. No. I flip it around. We're going to get to the bottom of this.
You're going to get someone who's drinking from the Kool-Aid and can sell this. So this could be an infomercial. EOS, it stands for the Entrepreneur Operating System. It was developed by Gino Wickman, and the purpose is to get into smaller businesses and really manage out, get the entrepreneur out of the organization.
Wait, get the entrepreneur out of the organization?
Out of the organization. And what they do is they develop a system and a process of how to hold meetings, of developing not an org chart, but an accountability chart. Everything that is common sense that entrepreneurs are doing, they build a system now that can hold the entire organization accountable, as well as unify it around a vision. And it's a way you communicate up and down the organization that now really embeds itself and threads itself all the way for us from our dishwashers all the way through our director levels. So everyone starts utilizing this, and they know what it is. It's, you get it, you want it, or you're capable, but everyone knows what they're accountable for. And so everything is measured based upon scorecards and how we're achieving those results and where we're going in the future.
You have been holding out on this fantastic information from me. Here, I thought we were going to talk about how to go from tactical to strategic. You've taken this to a whole nother level. You have a platform, a system in place that enables your company to flourish in this style, which then you can go back and force people into these longer term projects. Because I couldn't figure out how does an organization do that. You have to be so well organized to handle something like this. And I think I've just uncovered one of your secrets. You're using the EOS.
Well, you have to be organized, but also we were involved, to your initial question is, how do you develop your team members to be more strategic? We've always had a process. Every organization should have a process. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong, but if you're working from a process, then you have a place to start. And thus, as we matured and developed, we were looking for something that would hold us more accountable, and this is what we discovered. But we were holding meetings weekly in terms of mentoring and coaching. Each of us, I was doing one-to-ones once a month, more than check-ins. It's really about, again, you use that term servant leadership, talking to the individual, how can I help you? What challenges are you having? Et cetera, a coaching style, and then you move it more to a mentoring. This then came about where we were able to do what I've been doing and the leadership is doing, but then even spread it further. And that's what EOS has allowed us to do.
Well, you've just blown my mind. This is literally what businesses need to advance. Now, I've been involved for the past 8 or 9 weeks in a servant leadership class. And for those people who don't understand servant leadership, you take the traditional hierarchy of a pyramid and you turn it upside down and it becomes a V. And you serve the people that actually report to you. So you kind of flip this whole model on its head, right? You don't push down, you support. And that sounds like the coaching that you were talking about.
Yeah, because it's not about you. How do I make you more successful? And ultimately, if you're more successful, Campus Cooks would be more successful. And I'm here when we say coach is to obviously help you process individual issues, work through, some of the things that isn't just, blocking and tackling and A to B. Eventually that coaching, in terms of processing issue, we want to move to a mentorship. And by mentoring is now a bigger thing. It's a bigger philosophical thing. You start involving more, a little bit more personal stuff and get to you where you want to be. And it may not be always, it may not be with Campus Cooks. Your dreams are going to be different from someone else's. But if we can be a part of it and help you get there, you are, again, adding tremendous value, to our organization, but ultimately, to me as well, because I'm going to learn from you. And that's what I get my juice from is through that mentorship. So I'm glad you're taking this, an 8-week course about it. And what EOS does as well is it flattens it, and it's all about accountability. So I like those directions that people go to.
Yeah, this is really a surprising and unexpected turn here, but I think for the better, because it adds the support underneath this topic of how do you go from tacticals to strategic, because we're talking about an overall support system that is encouraging and allowing and tracking and supporting people to get to that level of thinking ahead and being self-governed. And I think, as you put it, how long can they operate without direct support? So I do have another question about the mentoring, because this topic does come up quite a bit on the podcast. Do you assign people mentors internally, or is it more of a, I'm the CEO, so of course my executive team I mentor? I mean, how do you guys internally kind of sort that out?
That's an excellent question. What we're trying to stretch our leadership team is to become more mentors and less, I don't want to say less coaches, but add it to it. We have monthly check-ins where everyone starts in a check-in. If other people have been trained when they come into our organization, is they give you a report out. Here's what I'm doing. Here's the status of this. Here's where this is headed. And to us, that check-in is not a report. To me, that check-ins for you to utilize my time, whether it be a half hour, an hour and a half, to work through issues and process. All these reports and check-ins, we want to get out of the way in a weekly meeting. We want to get that stuff out of the way in, quote unquote, that day-to-day communication. That once a month check-in is really, helping you grow and making sure that any hurdles or any challenges you're facing, that I can help take those away. So your question is getting back to, as we're going through the organization, we're trying to drive it down from the leadership team to our district managers and ultimately all the way down to our chefs who can, coach and mentor, dishwashers who want to move up within the organization.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So a lot of these meetings, these kind of status, these kind of check-ins, I do think the mentality is I have to give a status report to my boss. And you're saying, no, that's not what this is about. This is for you to become organized so you know what has to be done so you can stay on track, and you can ask us, you can ask me if you have questions, problems. You're going to another level. You're saying, okay, let's get that done. Let's get it out of the way. And now let's use this time more productively, higher value of that time slot with me, and have them turn that into more of a mentoring position to help them stretch and achieve what they want to achieve personally and professionally. Is that what you're saying?
Boy, you say a lot better than I am. I should start interviewing you for this podcast. You summarized it quite well. Yes.
Okay. That's good. So
another thing you asked before that, part of our organization, what we do as a coach, as a mentor, we want to encourage you to make mistakes. We want you to learn from the mistakes. I can't help you grow if you make a mistake and all I do is quote unquote punish you. I'm an entrepreneur, and if I haven't blown up the business by now, then I don't really see anything that you could do that could effectively bring it to its knees. So
you've been trying for 20 years to destroy the business.
I've been trying every day. I'm trying every day. I mean, who knows what I'm going to say on a podcast that, could come back.
No, but seriously, so how do you give people the permission to fail?
You can't obviously, we have protocols in place. Thus, it stops finance from wiring, $5 million. But let's just say, they make a mistake, a chef. A chef's not going to be fired for burning the dinner. Let's say he burns the dinner and he puts it out and he gets poor reviews. We're going to coach him and say, hey, I get it. You have to provide dinner. The product you put out obviously isn't up to your standards. You put it out because you felt you had to get it out because you owed them dinner. Well, you know what? Next time, don't put it out. Own the mistake and say, you know what? Tonight's chicken is super dry. I got caught up in something, or the cookies I promised you, I burnt to a crisp. I'll make it up tomorrow. That's one example of, it's a small thing, but it could, it's a big thing to a chef. So, thus, when you ask, what's big or small, we want to learn from it. Sales reps, they have different techniques, different strategies, different ways to close things. And it isn't necessarily price based. And if something didn't go right, you hope they learn, for the next sale, and the worst thing you can do is let someone go, on your dime, that they made the mistake so someone else can reap the rewards because they learned from me, and then they go somewhere else and they go, I made that mistake before. I won't do it again. You let them go or you punish them, and then they make, someone else, they add value to that organization. So we want to keep them learning, allow them to make errors.
You just brought up a point, and I had this conversation earlier with Tessa Stetzer. So, Tessa, if you're listening to this, I'm giving you credit. She said vulnerability is power. And what I just heard you say is that if that chef can be that vulnerable and say, I made a mistake, you suddenly have diffused that entire situation. And that's very powerful to own it, become accountable. And if you can bake that in, no pun intended, to your culture, then really you can move people forward. Help me understand, though, a little bit more, though, about this stretching people, because that was our original thought, our original topic.
When you look at that, can they do it? That's where you're giving them projects. And again, to stretch them, you're going to have an idea within your organization, the impact of these projects and the time involved. If you're building a house, I think the analogy is, how many nails can you hit in the day versus someone who lays the foundation for, a community of homes, and is it the installer or the window guy, or, who's really doing, everything underground in terms of all the, plumbing, et cetera, et cetera. That's when we talk about stretching and that span. How far can you work without direct supervision is really what's going to add value to you. If you have to oversee them constantly, that takes time. If they're able to work on their own and deliver quality work, that builds trust and you can continue to push them.
When I first thought of the topic, I was thinking, how do you think 1, 2, 3 years out strategically about the business? That takes a lot of confidence and courage, I think, to go to your boss and tell them, hey, I'm looking out 2, 3 years, or not even that far, and I see a problem.
That's part of their development. And that is part of what the mentoring allows. And if I go back and refer to what we spoke about earlier, EOS, part of EOS is a vision traction tool. And what that does is you lay out the vision really 3 years out, 10 years out of where you want to go. And within that, you're laying out each quarter projects, quote unquote, rocks you're working to do. Now, as you communicate that within the organization, I don't want to say in a hope and a prayer, because you are working through with everyone, you're starting to get people in this mindset of, okay, a year from now, we've put this on the board and we want to be here. How are we going to get there? And what part of that can I play to get us there? And so when everyone starts seeing the various projects that the total company's working for or towards, everyone can play a part and jump in. Hopefully that summarized it a lot better.
So tell us about some of these rocks that you and the company are currently working on.
Sure. We have several initiatives, one of which is we're finalizing a rollout for disposables. We want to move away from foam products, so we want to utilize, eco-friendly. And, that is obviously, a company rock, but so much is involved through procurement, working on a rebranding and a rollout. That's going to involve, again, sales and marketing heads it up, but you're going to have operations and HR, how do they play key roles in the communication? How do they now come up with new swag for employees? What's this now look like for our units within Campus Cooks and fraternity sororities of different marketing material that we post? Those are all examples of projects. The third one, we're switching to is obviously as we look to the future, 1, 2, 3 years out, is succession planning and an accountability chart. What new positions we'll be hiring, kind of frameworking when we'll be hiring. So those are all taking account of individual department needs, of kind of what they're seeing. So all this gets communicated, and then we're involving the entire organization within these initiatives, meaning the leadership team owns them, but people within these departments have pieces of it because we want to delegate parts of it to our team members. So hopefully that gives you 3 examples of what we do at Campus Cooks with some of these initiatives, ranging from, again, something direct from an operational, something more visionary in terms of an accountability chart, and then as something as a whole rebranding, which affects sales and marketing.
Yeah, the rebranding is interesting. So for people who aren't very familiar with Campus Cooks, tell us a little bit about this business.
Sure. Everyone's always intrigued. Campus Cooks is a food service management company for fraternities and sororities. We came up with the idea, quote unquote. I attended Northwestern University. I am a Phi Psi. Was there and worked my way up through the kitchen. You initially start doing pots and pans, and then eventually, as students, you run the kitchen. Through my 4 years, we went through 3 cooks, theft issues, attendance issues, and unfortunately the last one had to leave due to a pre-existing health condition. At that point in time, I had worked for a catering company over the summer, connected with them, and went to him with our problem. A, we want healthier food. B, we want more of it. And C, we don't want to spend any more money. He looked at our budget, saw waste, and said, this is a great idea. So he started catering direct to my chapter Phi Psi. I graduated. I went on and traded for a number of years in New York and Chicago on the floor. He grew that from catering, meaning dropping it off, to one chapter house, to doing 8 to 10 at Northwestern, but now putting in on-site chefs. So in effect, managing the kitchen operations, because as students and alumni, obviously dealing with employees is a bit of a headache, making sure you're getting quality food, et cetera, et cetera. Went back and then connected with Carl back in 2003, and I was done trading. Second time, last guy in, first guy out situation, and bought the business. And we grew it from that point in 2003 from Northwestern to about 45 campuses, 25 states where we're at today.
That's interesting. So you started as a cook, a dishwasher.
Dishwasher, grease traps, which you never want to do. It's pretty nasty stuff. To then managing, the kitchen operations, which affects some of the budget, but also really taking feedback from my brothers and giving it back to the cook/chef on meal prep.
Tell us, what are the trends that you're seeing right now in food service as it relates to campuses with all the crazy things that have been going on in the world? What do you see? What's happening? What do you think people can expect?
Well, first and foremost, when you deal with COVID, you had a lot of protocols in place, infectious disease protocols. For Campus Cooks, it wasn't a big change because we already have those playbooks. One of the first things you talk about trends was just how it was served. Everything had to be single served, boxed items. We were talking snacks, put in snack bags, et cetera, just due to COVID. As we're seeing now trends in food, everything really is customized, more on demand. What has happened in this shift is you can go ahead and get Uber Eats and pick from, 10 to 12 restaurants in your area and really customize, the entire entree. Thus, what we have to do is everything has to be, once we return in the fall, of course, and under guidance from the local health departments, is ensure that we have all these options out on the food lines, but almost break down the meal, segmentize the meal, where you can pick and choose if you want red onions or white onions or avocado, within these meals. That's one of the trends. It's of course, it's always healthy. It's always on demand, customized. That's one of the biggest things we've seen.
Well, I think you've really opened up our eyes to some different techniques here in terms of stretching people. And I know I'm going to, and I think other people are going to go do a little more research about this EOS. I think that is we probably could have had a whole separate session just on that and how you implemented it.
A lot of organizations are already doing it. It just now gives you the structure, the verbiage, that you can execute it. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Well, before we go, this is also a good platform if you have any key positions open anywhere in the country. If you would like people to connect with you or, send resumes into your HR department, are there any particular needs right now you'd like to just put out there? Maybe someone's heard this and they really like the sound of this culture.
We post positions nationwide for chefs. We do cook on site. As I said, 25 states. We also have, we'll be opening up positions. I think we have one currently available for IT. And the reason is a nice story. Our VP, who effectively runs the day-to-day operations and coordinates the leadership team, started out as a sous chef. And Joe moved from a sous chef to a head chef, then to an account manager, then into our technology seat. That just gives you an example of, with our organization, our growth mindset. We want to continue to move you. And it may not be the right spot at the right time, but as long as we keep working together and find something you really love, we're going to continue to move you up. So he's literally, I think, employee number 6. And now he's effectively running the day-to-day operations. So that's a nice story. Well, the other thing you got to keep in mind is everyone talks about development and mentorship. And yes, you want success. And yes, you wanted to have you're the Joe Nelson of your company. Boy, I'm going to tag that. You also have to recognize that by giving ongoing feedback and communicating two-way, not everyone wants to go to the next level. At some point, they may not have the desire nor the capacity, but it isn't a surprise. I mean, the last thing you want to do is surprise an individual and be like, you know what, this ain't going to work. You're working together. You're finding out what they like to do, where they want to go professionally and personally. And then, at some point, you're going, okay, this is kind of where I see you going, unless you really change, these behaviors or you really learn this. Or they may come to you and be like, you know what? I'm really happy. This fits for me. Okay. It doesn't mean that they're not a valued member of your organization.
Why force them up another level? Frankly, you might lose them as an employee.
Right. You don't want to lose them. And that's, when you're, and you just brought up personally and professionally, as you work with them and you're kind of looking for indications and milestones, one of them, you want to make sure they continue to grow personally and professionally, so you can continue that relationship going, and you're working with them. They can still ask, you want that person, that team member to ask for and take on challenges. Those are the people that, you want to keep investing, time in, you want to keep communicating with, you're also coaching them because they're taking, a mindset where it's not from their point of view. They're starting to look at it from the client or another team member's perspective. Once they start looking really outside and taking everything in, they're really bringing a lot of value. And lastly, as we talked about, if they're willing to make mistakes and then apply it to the next one, that's huge for me. I mean, I traded for a living. I can tell you I made a lot of bad trades, and so that's, a key for me is, make the mistakes, learn, grow from them, and move on.
Well, you must have made a few good trades. You turned around and bought a company and you haven't broken it yet. So you did something right as a trader.
Yeah, the pandemic tried. And I'm very thankful, as we finish this up, everyone's, we're moving on, everything's moving forward. But I do think having, that vision and the key to that culture with the organization is, really what you lean upon when times are tough. And, we stuck together and stuck to our values, with our clients, with our employees. And that's why we're looking forward to the fall, feeding more fraternity sorority members as things get more normalized.
Well, from your mouth to God's ears, we all want to get back to quote unquote normal. Bill, thank you so much. This has been just a great episode. Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. It's quite an honor. Thank you.